Okay, this is Chili Meat here. I wanted to bring up a video about EAH specifically. Now, the current version of EAH, I don't remember what it is, but we will get into that, has quite a few features. I feel it's gotten complex enough to do a video on. The guys over at HWS deserve all the credit for creating it. It's called Empyrion Admin Helper, and without it, this game would largely be unplayable in multiplayer. And I do mean largely. There's a lot of things that you just wouldn't be able to do without it, like recover ships and help players get through all the bugs that do exist in multiplayer, and there are many right now. I think there kind of always has been. Matter of fact, somebody shared a video on the forums that pretty much summarizes most of the major bugs. It was an honest review. The guy did an excellent video. Let me go ahead and get into this. Right now, what you are looking at is a replacement for TeamViewer. For any of you that are self-hosting or dealing with a hosted server that you have Windows access to, a dedicated server, this program right here called dwservice.net, this website, allows you to remote access multiple servers on Linux or Windows, makes it real easy to do the installation for it. It couldn't really be simpler. There are a couple walkthroughs available online. We're not covering that in the video. I just want you guys to know what I'm using to remote access. We're going to access the Empyrion server here. Now, a couple things about DW Service that are really nice is you can remote access files and folders. You can get a text editor. You can watch logs, so you can mark log files for quick access. You can monitor the resources of the server, and you can remote access the screen. When you click resource, it'll tell you everything about the server, including how much CPU is being taken up, total amount of memory used, available, disks and partitions, information about the operating system, the architecture, the name of the server, all kinds of pretty cool information. If you want a good look at it at a glance, it's a good way. It's a good tool. We'll get to the screen portion. Now, a couple of downsides to using this thing is when you have to paste text or remote, there's a button for that. You can't just paste. The clipboard's not shared. And copy text by remote works the same way. You can disable mouse and keyboard, hit the Windows key, and send Control-Alt-Delete remotely and full screen. We're going to enter full screen mode for this tutorial. This is Admin Helper. It comes with the installation of the Empyrion dedicated server by default. It is an indispensable tool that you absolutely need to be able to run the server, with any kind of ease of use, quality of life, anything added to it. Now to get into this a little bit here. You have a functions panel here. You have a list of players available. You can ask for details. You can say whether they're on or off. So if you want to see who all is online and only get their information, one click and it's there. You also get the location and player information over here as well. Sometimes this list is not exactly up to date. When it's not, you can click the refresh button up here. It'll refresh game data. It may take a time or two to get it to work. This is the chat, which is also translated live to your language. One of the nice things that I really like about this, it uses Google Translate, and you can just mouse over and see exactly what is being said. So if a player asks for help, no matter what language they're asking in, you get a full everything. You also see everything that happens in both chats, faction chat and global. So if people are having problems and they're not exactly saying something, you can kind of head it off and deal with it. It's really nice. You also have a chat feature down here where you can chat to all on the server or chat to a specific player. You can whisper to players. You can send an alert, an audio tone that they'll pick up in game, similar to the alert you get when drones are heading towards your base. I think it's the same exact sound. So anyways, that's the intro to the interface. There's a help thing here. Gives you a list of all the manual commands. I'm really glad they added this. Mostly Telnet. You can send in-game console commands. It is misspelled. Sorry about that. There's nothing I can do about it. I might want to let them know about that. Um, Via Remote X, you can save and exit. You can also specify a timeout. You can read everything that's here. It gets into the commands and the formatting and pretty much everything. It's very, very helpful. As for the functions, actually I should show you where you get the documentation from. If you search Empyrion Admin Helper, it'll bring you to one of the HWS pages that'll show you all the documentation for it. Pretty much everything's documented, but there are a few things that are not. If I ever had a pet peeve that existed, it would be lack of documentation. Now, a couple other things to note. It marks some people as cheaters. It's not entirely accurate. We changed some of our stack sizes, and with the changed stack sizes, we can't use the anti-cheat thing that's built into EAH. It's problematic, but it's not too hard to work around because it's pretty easy to identify who's cheating versus who's not. If somebody comes up and they're there 3 days and they have 50,000 blocks on their account within 3 days, they're probably a cheater. Especially if they're not in a faction or anything. Even more so if it's day one. You'll see a lot of players come in and they got like max stack sizes of everything. There are a few hacks available for the game that makes it really difficult to keep your server under control, so to speak. So definitely a good interface to monitor things through, see and chat. The fact that it translates is phenomenal. Means when we go through chat occasionally, which I'll show you how to do that, there's a log, you can pretty much pick up everything. You'll also notice in chat that there's a lot of talk about certain things on a pretty consistent basis. Let's get into some things specifically. We're going to hop around a little bit. We're going to start in logs and statistics and go with server statistics. You can kind of gauge the performance of your server within this window, and you can see the little peaks and dips that happen throughout player populations over time. Gives you a pretty good log, especially if you're logging this stuff like I do in a separate Excel spreadsheet. I have like 3 years of Excel spreadsheet month to month, active player peak, new player peak, the bottoms. I check this stuff pretty much every day. I miss some days sometimes, so it's not perfect, but it does paint a pretty good picture around releases. If you pay attention to chat as well, you can see, some of the other things, like things that players commonly talk about. You can find out how many times they've been talked about over a certain period of time. You can also find out, how many times people have asked for admin, what kind of bugs they're happening, and kind of head them off at the pass. Again, this is what makes this tool really, really, really useful. A couple of things to note here as we go through. Features. Shows all the statistics of the players. Shows all structures. Now we're going to touch on this briefly here in structures. This is the structure list for pretty much every structure that exists in the server. It does take a moment to populate because there are an awful lot of structures. But the information it gives you is really, really handy. I say that because we can sort the entire server by class size and find out if anybody's violating the rules of the server in a blink. And there we'll note Zenobia Station, JUN, has a class 21 that doesn't belong. And you'll notice a few other players that just don't think they have to follow the rules of the server. So really, it's super, super simple for us to catch players breaking the rules with this utility. We have a class limit, and players regularly try to go past that class limit. I don't know why they do that. You'll also notice that this JUN base is core type alien, owner type faction, owner June, and PKI faction orbit. They may own that faction orbit, they may not. Not 100% sure, but we'll have to go and check into that at some point. Not for today's thing. You can also restore players' bases, restore players' ships. That's pretty easy to do. You can right click on it, you can create a clone should it be missing from the game for whatever reason. You can destroy the structure, you can find out what happened around it. You can warp structures, warp your player to the structure. I'll show you how to set that up later. Warp structure to me, which is wherever your player is, and save the coordinates for further warps. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. You can also add from backup, add from blueprint, export information, set name, touch the structure. There's all kinds of stuff here. Load the playfield, unload the playfield, regenerate and set to alien. This tool gives you a lot of options that really help ease the administrative burden of dealing with these servers. And I don't care what anybody says, it is a burden. It is very, very difficult to manage these servers. At least for Empyrion it is. I have not found another game that's more difficult. A couple other things to note in here. There is an event manager. It is quite capable. We're not currently using it right now because last I knew it was incomplete, and to be honest with you, EAH does fail at a few things on occasion, so I don't want to rely on it considering all the other bugs that are there. We'll also touch on those later. There is an auto miner built into EAH that allows you to have like an orbital auto miner for your players. It's really nice. Like really, really nice. And they give you an interface to where you can change all kinds of things about it specifically. You can give players back ore and do all kinds of cool stuff should it fail, and it does frequently. So there's that. It's really neat. This allows you to add and edit items according to this, but I've never successfully added or edited an item. Not really. I don't know when this is going to work. I don't know if it's going to work. But the good thing about it is you can export all of the items from here, create an Excel spreadsheet, and see all the item IDs and have it externally searchable all the time. It's really nice because they do a really good job of keeping up to date with it. This is your CB survival template. You'll have to name it survival.xml. You can open it in here, and then you can edit the doggone thing. So you can totally change what people get in their survival command. Now, I will say this, you really should add whatever you have in that to the player loadout planet side in the YAML, because the CB survival command, if you have a lot of commands going all the time, or just a lot of stuff going on in general, isn't very responsive. It, I think, works 2 out of 5 times we use it. So 2 out of 5 players that type in CB:survival actually get the survival package. The rest of them do not. Some of them, it's their own fault. Some of it, the server just doesn't respond, like at all. I've run the command and had the server not respond to me for as long as 30 seconds, if ever. So there is an issue with that, which I'll show you in here eventually. Offline jobs, you can set up certain jobs to happen offline. There's a deposit check built in here. You have an alliance lists all the differences between faction alliance. There's a lot of information. It's really nice. Logs and statistics. Structure logs shows all the logs of structure movement while the program was connected. Structure activity, all the activity around the structures. Player shows all the player logs. Backpack. I don't know why this is in logs and statistics. Backpack should actually be in features, and I'm going to show you why. When you load the backpack backup, which is what this is, you can recover players' backpacks if they should happen to lose them in certain scenarios. Like, let's say somebody loses their backpack and it just falls through the planet. You can literally right-click and restore it to them as long as their inventory is empty. Really handy feature. Can't tell you how many times I freaking used it. It's really nice. Again, I think that should be up in features, not down here in logs and statistics. There's an activity log, which shows player activity. Family sharing statistics, which shows all the family share accounts of the players. It has historically been a little inaccurate, to be honest with you. Accounts shows player second account, shows possible second accounts of all players. Combat shows all logs of possible intruders. It's just basic combat log. You can find hackers really easily through this thing. It logs so much, it's ridiculous. Let's go in here. I'll show you what I mean. You can literally find out everything that happens and where it happened at. So let's say Dragon Beast here from CHS was on Devore at this location, and you can see that texture on line 0, distance to core 223. I mean, you can get a lot of information there. You can catch hackers really easily through this interface. I don't look very often because, in all honesty, as long as hackers aren't harming players, I really don't care. There's not a lot you can do about them, and to be honest with you, they're going to get bored in a day and leave usually anyways, unless they think they're getting one over on you, which you can go through here and you can figure that out if you feel like it. I would definitely say it's a good idea. This by itself, by the way, is not enough. There's other things in here that you need to look through to verify information. There's a chatbot log in here, so you can find out what kind of commands people are running. Anytime somebody runs an admin command or a chatbot command or any kind of commands that are run in the game, whether it be console or in chat, show up here. It's really handy. There's also a chat log that allows you to search through chat. So we can go and type in the word admin, and then we can scroll down and see all the latest calls to admin that exist in here. So it's really handy. There's also a warnings section here for showing all the warnings of players and factions. There's also an entities thing, structure limit, centers. You can show all the structure limit centers. If you have any. Generally just tells you everybody that clusters together a whole bunch of crap. There'll be really laggy areas. As you can see, June is our biggest one. They have just a crap load of shit all in one place. They're definitely our most problematic faction with creating lag. You can also send the logs and further information to the devs. Now, I don't know what good it does to send the devs any logs or anything via this utility anyways. I think it just packages the files and puts them in a zip for you. That's really all that does. Again, I've had mixed responses. Sometimes I'll get something back from the devs telling me, hey, we found an issue, it'll be patched so-and-so, but most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, we don't hear a damn thing back. Doesn't matter how you submit the bugs, you don't hear anything. I would imagine they don't have time to respond to everybody. So don't get your hopes up. Server stuff. Start, stop, and 5, stop now. No, the timer is not adjustable, and the timer is flawed, just so you know. It'll tell you it's stopping it in 5 minutes, then it gives you the next warning at 2 minutes, and then it gives you the next warning at 1:30. I personally, if you guys are listening, would really, really like this to have an adjustable timer, because in a lot of cases, 5 minutes just isn't enough. If somebody's in the middle of raising a base, they'll be lucky if they can get outside of it in 5 minutes sometimes. It has caused some issues. You can also kill the game, but I haven't had much luck with that. There's also an integrity check for the save game. I have actually had a few times where the save game has gotten corrupted where it fixes it. Or it fixes itself, I'm not sure. You can also clean up old structures from here. Config. There's a lot of config available in this utility. You have the tool config, which allows you to fresh start a server, wipe the save game, reset red counters from all players, check the database, reduce size as far as possible. You don't want to do that when the server's on, by the way. set your game version, change your translation language, which it does have quite a few languages available to it. Again, this is ran mostly by Google Translate. It's really nice. You can specify how long you keep backups for, how long to keep big data for, API IP, API port, allow to edit, GUI, play sound for chat alerts, upload only full backups. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. It's really a nice utility. Master slave, features, chatbot, structures, combat log, auto miner. Features we'll start with. You can auto ban players if they're caught cheating. If you have a custom config file, you probably don't want to activate that. You can check for cheaters and at least get them highlighted so you have a chance to go through and find them. You can opt in or out of backpack backup. You can have it save coordinate logs, reload player after logout, protect the world.dat file on wipe, and activate events. That's the event manager. We have it activated by default, but we don't use it. You can set the admin faction. Anything that violates structure rules or anything like that gets set to the admin faction. You can also tell it a whole bunch of other additional information we'll get into. That'll be later. Chat and chatbot, you can set a new player welcome message, a message of the day, which the message of the day had a really bad habit of being really, really repeatable. You can set additional chat alerts. You can also set where the chatbot works at, reset CV survival and CB reset, swear filters, the amount of survival money they get with the CB survival package, and all kinds of other information, as you can see here. You can also activate the CB go home command, which allows players to set their home and go home basically from anywhere. There's a whole bunch of structure information. Activate playfield faction restrictions, structure activity log. The playfield faction restrictions is actually something else we'll get into. Actually, let me get into that now. We'll come back to this list. If you activate playfield faction restrictions, there's a few things you need to do beforehand. Set belongs to no, you need to click that button so all of the origins are set to 999. What this does is it makes sure that none of the planets are tied to a specific origin and denying anybody else that's not in that origin. If you want to set a faction to belong or a planet to belong to a faction, you can also do it from this menu. You can do that over here where it says belongs to faction. I think Admin Helper just crapped out on me. This also happens frequently. Frequently enough that it's frustrating. I honestly wish there was another utility to use besides Admin Helper, but there isn't, so... I mean, we have one, but we'll get into that another time. We haven't finished developing our version yet. Okay, so yeah, Admin Helper crapped out. Close the program. Okay, finally let me. When that happens, speaking of our utility, you can go back through here and restart it, and generally it's fine. It does crash a lot, though. I mean, we get at least 1 to 2 crashes a day using Admin Helper for one reason or another. The database isn't very large. The overall overhead of the program isn't too extensive. It's just quirky. As I think anything developed in C# with all the .NET library crap is. Let me go through here and see if... No. It's 6:00-something a.m. Server restart time. Let's see where it left off. That's probably what happened. I was messing with it around that time. Yep. So it took everything down, and it's probably still got some stuff here. Let me go down here and investigate a little. Timetable. Okay, the timetable's clear, so it's typical server restart. We'll go ahead and close this out. Give me a minute here. Now you may find a secondary application running in the background. Don't panic too much. We do not, so we'll go ahead and run our start EGS server.command. This is something that does not come with the game. This is something we wrote. It's just a script. It's really easy. It's not much to it. It was one of the automated restarts you can schedule too. I'll show you where to do that as well. Now we validate this every single day during every restart, just so we can find out, like, if the hard drive craps out, we're going to know about it through here. We'll be able to go back and look at it. If we have any kind of file corruption or anything like that, we'll know about it. I mean, it's really, really helpful. And minimum, I would say that this server needs restarted at least once a day to have any kind of resemblance of stability. Most servers schedule it to restart twice a day. Ours is stable enough to where once a day is generally fine. I haven't had a reason to give it 2 restarts a day. Usually if we have playfield crashes and stuff, there's no time of day specifically that it happens at. We've had them happen anywhere from just after restart clear to just before. We actually had one playfield crash just before it restarted. So, anyways, let's go back through. Show you what I was showing you here. Go back to playfields. Okay, so belongs to faction. You can actually set it in there to the 3-letter identifier. I'll show you some examples here. Let's see here. Here's all the faction planets we have. As you can see, they're pretty easy to lock down. Doesn't take much. Though there are some planets that are not locked down, and it's only because there was a bug during one of the last few updates that basically this belongs to origin thing was just rejecting everybody no matter what it was set to. So you had everybody bouncing everywhere all over the frickin' server. And we got blamed for it. They thought it was something we did. So I had to disable it for a while until they fixed the problem, and now I manually have factions check in before I lock down their playfields. If a faction does not check in, I do not lock down their playfield. So as you can see, some have checked in and some have not. Probably something I should add in server messages, which we'll get to. So that's how you lock down faction playfields. Now, there's also some stuff you can configure for the Discord bot in there. Or not in here, but in the factions list. If you have factions that have specific channels in your Discord, you can give that faction a Discord channel ID, and they can communicate from within Discord to their faction within game. So while they're at work or whatever, they can find out what faction members are up to, you know, talk to them. It's really cool. Not many factions have requested it. I'm not sure it's a well-covered feature, but it's something you can do with Admin Helper. And the Discord bot for this lately works exceptionally well. Let's make sure that the server actually started up this morning without any issues. And it did. We see all our playfield servers up. We see additional ones, so people are logging in. Okay. So that's working real well. Let's go back to config, tool, structures, structure limit controls. They're again set in features, playfield. We'll go back there and I'll show you the limit controls. It's really cool. So you can help reduce lag by limiting the structures within certain playfields. So we can go over here and we can wipe not touch structures after so many hours, wipe structures after so many hours, check limits every X minutes, limit max warnings, the maximum amount of faction CVs by planet, the max class size by planet. There's a lot of stuff that we can set up. max alliance totals, max structures, total blocks, total devices. I mean, we can literally limit everything in the game or change everything in the game from here limits wise. There's also a global restrictions menu available in here that allows you to set the max allowed structures over all play fields for player and factions. I wish we could set class size in here. I really do. Because that would make things so easy. Again, if you guys are listening over there at HWS, that would be a really nice feature to have, is limit the class size in here instead of having to do it by individual planets. Because like, as HWS knows and as we know, we have different class sizes for PvE and PvP. And they're not really specifically based on any area. It's PvE areas are all limited to class 8. PvP areas are all limited to class 6. So it would be really nice if we could set those class sizes here instead of having to do them here where it takes frickin' forever. I'm just saying it would be nice. Actually, it would be amazing, but it would save some time for sure. Okay, so there's that. Let's go back to config. Go back to tool. We're still not done covering everything about the tool here. Structure control execution. If checked and the faction is set, class controls are executed if no one listens. Structure control deletion. If checked and the ship is set to the admin faction, it will be deleted after a set time, and you can set up those times and all that stuff over here. You can also set up a wait for DSL in seconds and other things. Combat logging. We have it active, but we do not have it set only in PvP because it makes it more difficult to catch hackers. Basically what it does is if you click only in PvP and click messages, it'll send the messages for what's going on in PvP. Problem is, if you click messages otherwise, it sets them everywhere. So there's really nothing that continues logging in PvE but disables the messages in PvE. If you set it to only PvP, it only does the PvP playfields, which is great, but the combat log does not. It doesn't tell you what's going on in PvE, and sometimes certain exploits make it almost impossible to catch them otherwise. So we can't use this. I mean, this is really useless like this. Again, another thing that I would really love to see fixed in this utility. You can also ignore starter playfields, do alliance checks, all kinds of things. Auto miner, you can configure everything about your auto miners here. Discord, again, you can set your IDs and do all kinds of stuff there. Debug and bug fixes. There's a lot of stuff in here. CB get shipped down, CB go to ship, CB warp rescue, CB get ship here. Warp rescue is new. I didn't see that last time. We're going to go ahead and tick that. There's also other stuff here like item exchange logs and connection logs and debug logs and detailed logs. All this advanced logging just eventually becomes really cumbersome. Nice features, but it can become cumbersome real quick. Personally, I'd like to have all the logging enabled if I could, because we always have problems. Now, in the beginning of this, you'll see the setup thing. You can use a different dedicated .yaml so that when the server updates, that renamed YAML is what it uses rather than the one that gets overwritten. You can also set a different dedicated .command so that you can have custom scripts that run on startup of the program, and well, that it uses to start everything, and it makes automation really simple. You can also give it a creative game player directory, an admin profile, and all kinds of other stuff. So I could use my player ID of Chili Meat, and now it knows who the admin is. And anytime I do any warping around, like warp to me to player, any of that, it will warp me specifically to that player from this interface. Really freaking handy. There's also server config you can do from here, including dedicated game config and the server config itself. Really nice stuff. I wish some of this was better documented, like the server description. I wish they'd document this a little bit better as to what you can use in there. Server name, saves directory, max players, reserved playfields, stop period. All playfield servers will be automatically stopped, blah, blah, blah. Maximum allowed class size should probably be changed to 8. Log flags disabled, okay. We fixed a few problems today. We also disable Steam family sharing. The reason we disable that is to prohibit family sharers playing, because sometimes there are people that we've banned, and they'll go and they'll create a family sharing account, give access to Empyrion to that, and they'll log right back in. And they can do that endlessly. So with that disabled, it prevents a lot of the problems. Only the game owner can play. That's the idea behind it. Okay, so game settings. You can set all the game settings here. Now, the enable trading, there's so many more options here, I don't even know what to do, to be honest with you. I say that because none of them were documented anywhere that I saw. You'll also notice that if you're unaware of it, every time you restart the server, these options may change along with these options. If you have that problem, then what is happening is the server is overwriting your settings in the game save file for your game options.yaml. You'll have to set it to read only while the server's shut off and after you make your changes, and save of course, so that nothing in the dedicated server itself can overwrite it. It is not Admin Helper overriding it. It is the dedicated server overriding it and rewriting to that file constantly. It literally writes every minute. So that's all of that. There's also custom chatbot options. You can go in here and set custom chatbot commands, show us dialogue or not. Dialogue is a little window that pops up. What the information is in regards to, and an answer from the server. You can kind of format this answer a little bit. I got some of the formatting down, but again, there's not a whole lot of documentation that tells you what individual symbols do or anything like that. At least I haven't found it. I would love to know where it's at. I would love to see it documented within EAH somewhere in the annals of the documentation. Would be handy. There's also a couple other things in the timetable that aren't well documented, like what parameter, like how to use time and parameter 2 to set like monthly timers or anything like that. Because we do have once a month timers that I wanted to run at one point, and I don't know how to set that up. I asked before, got an answer, set it up one time, we wiped everything out to scratch, and I don't remember how the hell I did it. But it's really easy to set stuff up. You can set up structure backups. You can set up a restart with additional parameters. Again, additional parameters here. Wipes the deposits on these planets every single week, which unfortunately means it wipes auto miners too, but it is what it is. I wish there was a way to wipe the ore and not wipe out anything else. Well, not even wipe the ore, but just reset it all. One in-game command that allows you to reset all the ore on a planet would be really frickin' nice. Or a reset all command. The fact that everything's relying on Admin Helper is kind of a travesty. At least to me it is anyways. So if you want to create a chat in here, it's really easy. You click in here, you create a chat or whatever you want to do. There's a lot of different, you can even run shell scripts from here. But you can set it up in there, give it a time to run at, as often or as not as you like. And then you can give it a parameter here. Give it a time, give it a specific time to run at if you want, like every Friday at 9 o'clock or 900 hours. It'll do it. This task scheduler is probably the best part of Empyrion, period. I freaking love it. Delete that, delete that. Now we had mentioned a problem that's really common on the server. So we're going to create a new chat. And we're going to remind players every hour that if they want their faction planets locked back down, they must check in with Chili Meat or P4 and D4 to have that done. We are Now doing this manually as recent bugs caused enough problems to require it. Now there's also something else I wanted to remind players of. So we're going to go chat. We're going to go every 2 hours. Reminder. Is 8.59. Okay. Now we've got a reminder in there. We can click OK. And those will pop up according to that timetable. Now that pretty much concludes the basics of Admin Helper. There are other things through here that you can look at and play around with. I wouldn't be too afraid to experiment with it. There are also some things that I did not cover for good reason. Being able to hook up masters and slaves, I didn't bother covering that. Because for the most part, that's pre-configured with hosts anyways. And if you're going to do it yourself, it has to be done at the start of setting up Admin Helper rather than later. You can't just implement it afterwards. It's a little more difficult and time-consuming to implement it after the fact. It also causes problems, and you have to change some config, and there's just things that get in the way. Another thing I did not cover is cross-server warp. I have had problems in the past with cross-server warp. I don't know if they fixed it, but I've heard that they have. It's pretty easy to set up for the most part, but it can be confusing, and it's a feature that's not super well documented. So do be sure to pay very close attention to how cross-server warp works if you're going to use it. Know what you're doing, pay attention to the settings. You don't really have to be too scared to mess with it a little bit, but there are rules that your players are going to have to follow for it to work smoothly. If they warp from one server to another, the server that they warp to, they're going to have to wait 5 or 10 minutes to log into it. If they don't already have an account over there, it causes problems. I have had issues with it. I don't know if that's been fixed, but it wasn't fixed back when we were using it. Some of the issues you come up with if players are logging in too soon are issues like their ships not being there when they log into the other server, their ships not being complete when they log into the other server. That has also been an issue. And usually you can't really repeat the same issue 2 times in a row either. It depends on the timing they logged in at. Really, I wish Admin Helper checked the structure to make sure that it was actually loaded and would forcibly log out a player if they logged in too soon and tell them, and maybe even reinitiate the process. There's a few things they could do. They could have done to fix that. I don't know if they have. Again, I say that because I really don't know. We haven't used it in like a year and a half, a year, somewhere around that ballpark. And our experience was not great. From what I've heard of miscellaneous players that have left HWS, their experiences haven't been necessarily stellar with it. That could be for a lot of reasons, most likely because people don't really read instructions very well. If you're going to do server-to-server warp, there needs to be like as little player interaction as possible with the process, in my opinion. I say that because players are not patient, and not everybody reads through the user manual. So if you can't make it foolproof, or at least as foolproof as possible, it's probably not a good idea to use it. But that pretty much concludes everything about Admin Helper. I really like the utility. I really wish it did more. You've heard some of the requests I've made throughout this that I'd really like to see in it. A few additional things I'd like to see. I'd like to see a mod manager built in. I would like to see a plug-in system for this utility. I would also like to see an external database that mods might be able to access. I think there's a lot more you could do with the utility, but I don't know if it'll ever make its way in. Probably not. If it does, it'll be way later. A web-based backend would be really nice too. Though there is another modder working on that, so it may never get incorporated into Admin Helper. I don't know. I'm not really sure. It's one of those, it just started. It looks a lot like Admin Helper. It's really usable. I really like it for basic information and everything. I don't know how functional it'll be. And it also kind of parallels our own project where we're just replacing Empyrion Admin Helper altogether, giving it a web backend and just having it manage everything to do with the server. And I do literally mean everything. We've got it to where we can literally wipe the server and carry over information to a new folder and automatically, not have to create backups. It renames the old folder and then copies everything out of that renamed. And then after so long, we make sure it's stable, we make sure everything works. A month and a half passes and it'll delete that folder on its own, eventually through that script we wrote. Really, really nice. I just noticed something here. Oh, we're going to leave that in, because that's still kind of true. So anyways, that's a couple things I'd like to see. This is pretty much what Admin Helper is and how to use it. Installation and stuff, it's automatically bundled, so as long as you can figure out how to install the dedicated server or you're already on a host, it's probably pre-configured for that host, or you already have the utility in your dedicated server and you aren't using it. It is a little bloated. A couple pros to this are it does really make the server manageable. Without it, half the stuff you need to do you couldn't even accomplish. Partially because in-game commands are incomplete. I don't think Elion ever really went back and made sure that some of the commands were uniform and that they worked well, and there's a lot of, I don't know, it's an alpha game, it'll get patched eventually type stuff. EAH does smooth a lot of the bugs over and give players ways to solve their own problems. It's a great utility for that reason alone. And like I said earlier, I really do not think that this game would be half as playable in multiplayer without it. You can definitely tell the difference between a server and has it and one that doesn't. When I get back to the bloatiness, I mean that there's a lot of stuff you can't quite... It doesn't work well enough, at least in our experience with it. Like a lot of the chatbot commands, most of them work okay, but some of them get unresponsive over time. And you can't really predict how responsive the commands are going to be. It's kind of a problem, especially when players rely on them because there's so many bugs in the game. There's also some API issues in the background that make working with this utility alongside other mods kind of difficult. Better coding gets around most of it, but there's some of it you just can't fix until Elion finally fixes the API. You'll also notice that the tool isn't necessarily on top of things all the time. Sometimes you have to restart it. Sometimes you have to refresh the data several times. Sometimes when you're trying to bring in a ship that vanished, you're trying to clone it into existence, you have to do it 8 or 10 times. I've had as many as 20 before it'll finally pop up in the server. So while it is quirky, it's as useful as it is quirky. There's nothing else to use, so it wouldn't matter. Anyways, I hope you all liked the video. I hope it helps you to learn to use this utility a little better. I'm sorry I kind of pop back and forth on a few things, but I've been using this so long, it's really hard for me to gather all my thoughts as I'm making this video and do it better. I could probably go through it a bit more logically, but if you have to, pause the video in places, go back, experiment a little bit, look over what I've showed you. There's a lot to this utility that is really, really useful and really handy. The game's all alpha. Everything's alpha. Nothing's going to work perfectly, and you are going to have problems with everything all-inclusive in the game. Just keep that in mind. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope this video helps you out. I haven't seen another video on Admin Helper yet that's really a full walkthrough that shows you everything new and up to date, and I will update these videos occasionally. Take it easy. Hope you enjoyed the video. Why are you still watching? Bye.